Doing it in a second there. Okay, so hi everybody. My name is Lena. Like Vanessa said, I'm an environmental educator over at ecomaine as well. So just to start off, I wanted to let you know that ecomaine is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. So if you guys aren't familiar, we are owned by 20 Maine municipalities. So we are also quasi-municipal, and we help those municipalities to manage municipal solid waste, also known as MSW, and recycling. So if you are not familiar with our communities, these are what we have so far. There are some changes. This isn't quite up to date. We have some communities that have joined and some that have left us. One that is not yet on this map is Westbrook, so we have to get them on there pretty soon. But we are spread throughout most southern Maine, from Lemoyne over and then into 2 communities in New Hampshire. So we have a pretty wide spread. I believe we're at right around 68 communities right now. And these communities are also divided amongst owner communities, which there are 20 of, associate member and contract member communities. So the associate and contract member communities will have an ongoing contract with us, and their relationship with us changes with those contracts. So it's just a fun fact if you guys are living in one of those communities. So over here at ecomaine, we have 3 facilities. We have our waste to energy facility, like Vanessa mentioned, where we take municipal solid waste or your trash, and we combust it at 2000 degrees and make it into ash, which goes to our ash fill. So during that process, we're able to reduce the size that the trash takes up by 90%, which expands the life of our landfill and makes it a lot more sustainable over time. So in addition to those, we also have our recycling facility, which we're going to go into the nitty-gritty of today. And between the 2 facilities where we are taking your waste, we are accepting more than 175,000 tons of trash a year and 35,000 tons of recycling a year. So this, of course, fluctuates from year to year depending on the circumstances, pandemics, you know, those types of things. But those are generally where we fall for those amounts. So before we had our waste to energy facility, all of our trash took up space in landfills, right? So waste to energy has become pretty large, especially in New England, because we don't have as much open space to put our trash, right? I'm sure a lot of you might remember maybe 20 or 30 years ago when most towns had their own landfills, where we would just take our trash and dump it in a hole in the ground. But this isn't really sustainable, of course, because we only have so much land, right? We can't really do that over time. We know that we're always going to be accruing waste. So we have to do something that's a little bit more sustainable if we want to continue to have really open, beautiful spaces. In addition to occupying valuable land, landfills also release methane gases because the waste that's in landfills is not broken down already. When we are putting ash into our ash fill or landfill here, that waste is completely inert because it's already been combusted. So that degradation and breaking down process has been sped up a lot by the combustion process. So there's no emissions that are coming out of our waste when it's combusted and sitting in a landfill as ash. It's completely inert. So there's a lot less harm to water systems when we are combusting our trash and putting it in a landfill. And of course, less wildlife is attracted because the ash isn't smelly. So there are a whole lot of impacts that landfills can have. And that was one of the motivating factors to create the recycling system as a whole, of course. So there is a whole lot associated with landfills, and that's why we do what we do when it comes to waste energy and recycling, because we want to reduce the amount of landfills that are occupying space in our country, of course, and make this whole process more sustainable. So you guys are familiar with ecomaine. You might know that we were established in the 70s by but a handful of Maine communities that each had their own local landfill. Like I mentioned, they each had their own town landfill, and they decided to join forces and buy 240 acres, which is still our landfill here today, and own it together instead of having them all in their individual towns. So at that time, we were regional waste systems. And in the 80s, we expanded to 20 municipalities. So those are our owner communities today. And in the late 80s, we built our waste to energy facility. So prior to then, we were baling up raw trash and putting it in our landfill. And then we were able to create our waste to energy facility and start landfilling ash. So we were able to do that to drastically expand the life of our landfill, and to create energy from our waste as well. So we are able to generate energy from our waste, which goes back into the grid and powers homes and businesses and buildings and all of that, in addition to our facilities here, our electric vehicles, and so on. So in the 90s and early 2000s, we started recycling. And then in 2006, we started our single sort program. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with what single sort is. It's a term that is used to describe recycling, when instead of having a whole bunch of different bins, one for paper, cardboard, plastic, metal, glass, in your household, you only have one bin, and you put all of that recycling in that one bin, and then we take it and we sort it out. So that's mostly what we do here today in terms of recycling. We don't make new things of the recycling here. We send bales of individual commodities, which we'll go through today, off to a manufacturer where they use it to make new things. So here at ecomaine and in the state of Maine as a whole, we do our very, very best to abide by the waste hierarchy. That's what we use to base our mission off of, which is over here on the left. We're all about providing comprehensive long-term solid waste solutions in a safe and environmentally responsible and economically sound manner. And we really pride ourselves in being a leader in raising public awareness about sustainable waste management. So to do all of those, we of course promote the 3 R's, which I'm sure you guys are all familiar with: reduce, reuse, and recycle. But in addition to those, we've added a few onto that, which is compost and digestion, which helps take that waste out of the waste to energy process as well, right? There's a whole new life that can be made out of food waste and yarn trimmings and all of those types of things. And then we have our waste to energy and our landfill. So those 2 options are way above landfill, right? There are 2 ways to divert those from the waste, from the landfill stream, which is what we have a goal of doing here at ecomaine. So you guys might see the waste hierarchy throughout Maine because it's something that we try to do outside of ecomaine as well, but just to let you know that as well. So before we go down into the dirty of how we just separate out our recycling, I wanted to go into what is in our trash and recycling as a whole, right? So in your household trash, you're probably going to have some recyclables. You know, we're not perfect, so we do throw away some things that could have found a recyclable life. And we also throw away some things that could have otherwise been used by somebody else, right? We all have a few, I don't know whether they're books or clocks, or toys that get thrown out that somebody could have found a life out of. So those end up in our trash, in addition to organics. About 70% of your average household trash can be reused, composted, or otherwise diverted from that landfill or that trash stream. So it's important to do the education like we're doing here today to figure out exactly what has to go into our trash and recycling, and kind of take a pause on our trip to the trash can and think about if this could have a new life in some form, whether that's reused, recycled, or composted. So into our recycling bin, we should have 5 things, and we really should not stray at all from these 5 things. And they are cardboard, paper, glass, metal, and plastic. So there are some contingencies into these rules and some nitpicky things as we go along that we'll mention, but those are in general the basic 5 recyclables that we take care at ecomaine. All right, so depending on where you live and what kind of setup you have, your recycling is either going to get put on your curbside, it's going to get thrown into one of our silver bullets, which is that container on the left there, or it is going to go onto a curbside and get picked up by a truck. Or brought to a transfer station. Sorry about that. So our friend in the truck here has one of our really cool dual-sided trucks. So he has a side on his truck for trash and a side on his truck for recycling. So you'll see him pick up one of the bins with an arm and use a button on the inside to open a container for that side of things. And then he will put that container down and open the side for the other material, whether it's cardboard or recycling or trash, and he will dump that in. And then it's divided down the middle, so when he gets here to ecomaine, he kind of is able to push it out depending on what tipping hall floor he's on here. So once he gets to ecomaine, like I mentioned, he will dump it onto the tipping hall floor. And what you see here is our friend in the front loader that's pushing all of the recycling up and onto the conveyor belt, which kind of starts the process of recycling here at ecomaine. But just before that happens, as you'll see down on the bottom right, our friends on the tipping hall floor are going to estimate the amount of contamination that's in that load. So to help us out here, I wanted to give you guys a definition of contamination. So over here at ecomaine and generally in the US, contamination is defined as items that are in our recycling bin or in our recycling facility that are not recyclable by that facility. So what determines whether something is contamination or not is dependent on that facility, because all of our facilities have different equipment, like the ones that we're going to see today. But as you can see here, these are all recycling pictures from our facility here. So we have things like piñatas, bagged recyclables. So when people throw their recyclables into plastic bags, pillows, fabric is a really bad one. That picture on the bottom left here is fabric that got caught in some of our equipment, started creating friction, and then generally started to burn and almost catch on fire, which happens quite a bit with contaminants, which is why they are contaminants, right? We can't recycle them 95% of the time because they clog our equipment or are otherwise dangerous to our employees. So other forms of contamination that aren't shown up here are things like propane tanks, fireworks, all of those things that could be really damaging to our equipment and really dangerous to our employees. And they also generally just don't fit in those 5 materials of plastic, cardboard, paper, glass, and metal, and paper. So to start off, once we push those recyclables onto that conveyor belt, they first get sorted through our paper and cardboard stars. So as you can see here on the left, we have some humans that are helping us sort out, but we also have these stars that are on an axle that spin pretty quickly and allow things that are light, fluffy, and flat to float up and over the stars, and things that are heavy to fall through the stars. So what you should see is glass, metal, and plastic falling through the stars, and the cardboard and paper floating up and over them. But what you'll also notice is those contaminants, like we can see a plastic bag, we can see what we call tanglers, so that's ribbon, streamers, the Hannaford grocery bags, all of those get caught in those axles and make it so nothing can fall through. So if nothing can fall through the stars, then we are not able to run our equipment right, because all of the materials would be going into the paper and cardboard piles instead of getting sorted out like they should. So I think in a second here, we'll be able to see a good picture of some contamination. But in the meantime, you can see the paper that's getting floated up and over the stars, and everything else should be falling through. So you'll see some paper, some plastic that's in the beginning that eventually gets sorted out and gets dropped down onto a lower conveyor belt while the paper gets sorted up and over. And so when those plastics, metals, and glasses fall through, they get sorted out onto the lines while the paper gets floated up and over and into its own conveyor belt, which we can see here. And it then goes to the baler, which we'll show you in a little bit, and gets put into its own container of paper things only. So after paper gets sorted out, we also have humans that are helping to sort out some more stuff. But this is the contamination I was talking about, with all of those different things getting caught up in there. Of course, it's moving pretty fast, so it's hard to see exactly what they are. But there are things like fabric and extension cords, Christmas lights, anything that can really get tangled up and is not part of those 5 recyclables is really bad for our equipment in this way. And we have to lock all of the axles and actually have humans go in and cut out all of those individual contaminants, which takes a really long time, and it actually happens multiple times a day that they have to go in and do that. So the more education like this we do, the more we can get the word out that those types of materials are not recyclable with us at ecomaine, and the better our equipment off is and our employees are. So after we sort paper and cardboard out, we have a magnet that takes out metals. So for regular ferrous, steel, and tin metals, we use a regular magnet like you would use on your refrigerator that picks up a recyclable and then spits it out over a container that's for those types of metals. And for non-ferrous or aluminum metals, it's actually different because, as you can probably imagine, magnets don't attract to those kind of metals. It's like when you push two positive ends of a magnet together and they repel each other. That's the kind of force we use for those aluminum metals. So you can see in the video now that it's almost like a puff of air is floating the aluminum up and over and into its own container. That's that reverse magnet that's pushing it away. So we use a reverse eddy current to push away aluminum and a regular magnet to attract steel and tin and then deposit it into its own container. So the plastics and the glass are continuing to go onto this conveyor belt. And then we have the glass that gets sorted out. And we don't, unfortunately, have a video of this because inside this container, we have, instead of those rubber stars that we use for the cardboard and the glass, we have metal stars. So it's not really safe to be in a room of shattering glass. So we can't take a video of that for you guys, but that is the gist of what happens. This glass gets shattered into really small pieces. And once it's shattered, it gets stored at our ash fill and is actually a free resource for any of our community members that want to use it for construction projects. A lot of places use it for fill or for road aggregate. It gets mixed in with some other materials to make an asphalt type material, or it can get used as countertops. Most of, or all of the countertops here at ecomaine are use some of our glass in them. So it's a pretty fun material to use in 2 different recycling projects, but all of that is kept here in Maine and reused by our communities. So plastics, as you can probably imagine, are a little bit trickier than the other materials because there's so many different kinds of them. So we do accept all of the 1 through 7 plastics. And for the most part, we use human power to separate them out, as you can see in the picture on the left. But I will replay this video for you because it is pretty quick. For our number 1 plastics, we use what we call an optical sorter, which is a computer system that identifies that plastic by kind of using an eye, which is why it's called the optical sorter. So it scans the plastic, identifies it as a number 1 or a PET plastic. You're thinking like Poland Spring water bottles, your clamshell containers that hold your berries, anything that's that really clear and typically pretty malleable and crushable plastic is that number 1 plastic. And so it identifies it as number 1. And then as you can see in this video, this green thing right there in front of you is identifying the number 1 plastic. And then it sends a puff of air up and under the piece of number 1 plastic and pushes it up and over. So if you look really carefully, you can see some of the plastics going up and over the bar in the back there. Those are the number 1 plastics. So because of the nature of number 1 plastics, it's a lot of what we get here. Number 1 and number 2 are the most frequent plastics that we get. Number 2 would be all of your milk jugs, so those clear white plastics, and also all of your laundry jugs. Those are more rigid plastics, but they are really frequent here, and we are able to use them pretty readily to make new things. So like I said, though, we do accept 1 through 7 plastics here at ecomaine. There are some other facilities that will only take 1 and 2 because those are the most easy to recycle, but we like to take all of them because we don't think it's right to have those sitting in a landfill anywhere. So we do take all of the materials and bale them up into their individual kinds and sell them off to be made into new things by manufacturers. So like I mentioned, the final once we have it sorted into the individual commodities, the final product of this process is bales of an individual type of recyclable material. So in this video here, we have bales of cardboard. So this machine, if you guys have seen the movie WALL-E, is called like a WALL-E machine. We have our friend here on the forklift that will flip over the bale a few times. And while he's doing that, he's checking for contamination in those bales. So in paper and cardboard, it's usually plastic bags or other plastic films, like the things that wrap your paper towels and toilet paper rolls. All of those materials act like cardboard and paper in our machinery, which is why they're not recyclable here at ecomaine. And to be able to sell these bales of recyclables to the next stage of manufacturing, we need to make sure that they're nearly 100% of whatever material we're trying to market. So it wouldn't make sense for somebody that's trying to make new cardboard out of old cardboard to buy a bale that's 25% plastic. So we try to make sure that it's closest to 100% of that material as possible, which is why we have different rules about what we can and cannot recycle with us here. So this video is also pretty nice because it shows our friend on the forklift lifting up those bales and putting it into a truck. That's exactly what happens here, though it's on a lot of varying days. So it's pretty lucky that we were able to get that video. But once they get loaded onto the 18-wheeler, that hauler will take it to the manufacturer that bought the product from us, whether it's cardboard, paper, metal, glass, or plastic, and we'll use that to make something new out of it. And I'll give you some examples of that down the line here. So as I've mentioned a little bit here, recycling is really only part of the greater process, right? If we're thinking about municipal solid waste management and all of that, of course, is part of that process, but it's also part of creating a circular economy. And what the goal is with a circular economy is to make sure that there's no waste in the process at all, right? So if we were to have waste, it would be shooting off from this circle here, but instead we would just have this circle going through and constantly generating new materials out of what we already have. So there's a whole lot that goes into this process, of course, a lot of science and infrastructure that go into making new things out of what we already have and so on. But part of this process is also using your dollar to support products and manufacturers that are using recyclable materials, because the more demand there is for those processes and those manufacturers doing what they do, the more that there's going to be a market for that. So it goes all the way down the line. The more demand there is on the consumer side for cartons or bike parts or what have you made out of recycled materials, the more demand there is going to be on our side for us to generate those recyclables and to get more people to recycle. So when we're doing this process, it's definitely not a cut and dry process where you can say, oh, just throw your money at this manufacturer because they use all recyclable materials, right? It's very hit or miss. And there's some legislature that could potentially be passed that kind of puts the onus back on the manufacturer and makes it so they can save money by using recyclable materials in their packaging or their products, which is the end goal, right? That's really the only way that we're going to make sure that using recyclable materials is something that is going to happen long term. But in the meantime, there are a whole bunch of different products that you can buy to support the recycling process. So these are some examples of what our recyclables get made out of, especially from milk jugs. There's a ton of different options, especially when you think of like Trex lumber, which has become pretty popular now. You can make things like park benches, Adirondack chairs, entire playgrounds. If you guys are familiar with South Portland, Willard Beach has a playground that is made out of 100% milk jugs, and even the nails that are in that playground are made from recyclable metal. So there are initiatives like that that are really powerful and generate more of an impact on the local recyclable market as well. So there are a whole bunch of different things that can be made out of newspaper too. We're talking new paper, egg cartons, paper plates, even countertops and kitty litter, and then metal cans, of course. Metal is great because every time we recycle it, it has the same product life, right? So plastic and even sometimes paper, the life of the product degrades a little bit every time you recycle it. So if you're recycling something that was already previously recycled, the life of it gets a little bit shorter every time. But with metal, that's not the case. And there's kind of a constant life of that to have for years and years to come, which is great. So if we wanted you to take anything from this, it would be these two options here. So plastics can be confusing. It's usually the most confusing aspect of recycling for most folks. And if you're having trouble with an item, you know that you've gone through a whole education process on it, but you're still not sure. There are 3 rules that we have for us at ecomaine here that can tell you whether it's recyclable or not. And those rules are whether it has the number 1 through 7 on it with that chasing arrow symbol on the bottom. If it is a container. So we really have to recycle containers here. We can't take just the lid from your paper coffee cup. We cannot take like the front part of your pen package. The bottom part we can take, that cardboard we can take, but we can't take just that regular plastic that's on the front. And it has to be a rigid item. So we can't take any plastic films that wrap around your paper towels or your toilet paper, any Ziploc bags, any Hannaford bags. All of those items can be recycled, but just not with us here because, like I mentioned, they clog our equipment and have the potential to do some pretty serious damage to our equipment and employees. So those are our 3 rules for recyclables. For plastics. And then if it's not a plastic, we do have our recyclopedia. So it also does plastics, but it's especially helpful with items that like your basketballs, your shoes, clothing, furniture, just about everything that you can and cannot recycle is in this online database. So you just have to type in whatever item you're thinking about trying to get rid of, and we will give you an option for that end of life process. So, and even if there is not an item, so you have something, a new product or something else that's just not in our database there. We do have over 1,000 items in there, but sometimes we miss one. So if you don't have one, there's an easy option to recommend an item, and we'll do the research for you and let you know how you can dispose of it. And it also has a nice fun little game there on sorting to see if you are an ecomaniac recyclable resorter or not. So I wanted to thank you for coming out and doing our presentation with us here today, and let you know that there are a bunch of ways to get more involved with us here. You can follow us on social media and also reach out to us via phone or email if you have any questions that we're not able to answer right now. But that being said, we are more than welcome to answer all of your questions right now. So if you have any recycling questions, feel free to put them in the chat or to pop off mute and to ask us with your voice.
Yeah. So we already have one question in the chat, and we can just take care of that now. And then as others come up, we can also kind of go through some of the generic questions, the ones we get a lot from folks. So the first question that came in was, have you noticed an increase in contaminants due to COVID cleaning? Which is definitely a real thing. I know I personally did a lot of that when the stay-at-home order went in. So as people are purging their homes, are we noticing more contamination? You want to take that one, Lena?
Yeah, sure. So in general, yes and no. We, of course, see seasonal contaminants. Like we see a lot of Christmas lights right after Christmas. In the spring, we usually see a lot of garden hoses. So that is certainly true. I think that we generally saw more household stuff this spring, but that also spring cleaning happens every year. So it's kind of consistent too. So it's not exactly easy to tell, but generally, yes. I don't think that our, the amount of recycling we had was increased though.
I think we also notice it is seasonal contamination. So you kind of touched on that, but like in the fall, we start to see people are finishing up their camping season. We start to see propane tanks, which is really dangerous. We also, around Halloween, we'll get jack-o'-lanterns in the recycling center. In the springtime, there's a lot of tanglers. So in the spring, this is when people are cleaning out their garages, their sheds, their basements, all of these areas. And we're finding garden hoses, long stretches of metal cable. A lot of that stuff that really should be reserved for disposing of in the trash or at the transfer station. So yeah, that recyclopedia is super helpful. if you ever have an item in your hand and you're just like, I don't know what to do with this thing, you know, give it a quick search. It's just like Google. It's like you just search in the name, and it's not a one solution, you know, fits all, because for some people you might have access to, you know, composting services, but for some people you might not. So there is kind of like a tiered level of, you know, we would love it if you could compost this, but if you can't, this is what you can do. And it gives you multiple options. Or, you know, we'd love it if you could, you know, find somebody else to take that mattress, but if you can't find someone else to take that mattress, this is what you should do. So it's multi-layered. We try to make sure that if we're telling people how to dispose of something, we're telling them something that can be meaningful to them and that they can actually use that information. But yeah, I think in terms of contaminants, we're seeing more residential waste. We're seeing a lot more questions coming in. And we do one particular thing that I've noticed a lot more calls in than anything else is hazardous waste and e-waste. So if your towns have, you know, maybe suspended their electronics collection, I know a lot of municipalities try to have one of those at least in a year. But a lot of towns are actually having to cancel that because they're worried about the spread of coronavirus because of consolidating with a lot of people, or that the vendor is just not willing to participate. So we're seeing that happen a lot. Really good option for most of you here living in Southern Maine. We've got Westbrook, we've got Portland and South Portland, and some others here too. But if you're in Southern Maine, Riverside Recycling is a great option for a lot of those like miscellaneous items. They have an area for yard waste. They have an area for recycling. So if you don't have curbside pickup at your house, and you're just looking for a really easy drop off, they have a free drop off location on site there. You know, they can take scrap metal, they can take, you know, electronic waste, they can take hazardous waste once a month. They take the first Saturday of every month for at least this summer season and some into the fall. I think they stop in November. But you can bring your hazardous material there for safe disposal. Because that's one thing that a lot of people are trying to get rid of right now, especially as people have been doing their COVID cleaning. They're finding lots of chemicals that they need to just get rid of. And there's not a lot of really good options for them right now. So let that be a good resource for you if you don't have an option. I know South Portland canceled their e-waste collection. And I think their hazardous waste, their event for June was canceled. They've got a tentative one in October, so we'll see. But yeah, I think right now, like, you know, it's hard for everyone to try to find the right safe places to dispose of things, and nobody wants to sit on that material. So, you know, give us a call if there's anything in particular you're looking to get rid of and you're having a hard time. But yeah, I mean, those are definitely some of the big ones that we're struggling with right now. Other questions
we had was lids. So I did mention coffee cup lids, which are one that we cannot take here, but in the general rule for lids otherwise is to leave it on the product. So if you have a milk jug, you want to leave that lid on top of the milk jug. Or even if you have like a paper-ish container for soup, those types of containers, you want to leave the lid on, and it'll just get separated when they go to chop that material up and wash it.
Yeah, I have the physical example. So you were asking about a peanut butter jar, and I have one because I like showing people that it needs to be empty and not clean. So this is my example for that. So perfect. But peanut butter jar, you know, really scrape it empty, put the lid back on. Same thing with your milk jug, same thing with your water bottle, because the lids off are really light, fluffy, and flat. And so those tend to behave like paper and they'll float over the screens. Or they're too small and then they end up just falling through all of the equipment and littering our floor. So the floor of the recycling center is covered in bottle caps, both the metal ones and the plastic ones. So it's good practice if you can to keep them on. But if they've been separated, like let's say you had a Tupperware container and somewhere along the line you lost the container and you've got a lid that's extra and it's beat up and it's old, that actually should go in the trash, because otherwise it's just going to float into our paper sorting screen and contaminate the paper and make it harder to sell. And paper in particular is one that we want to be really careful about when we're going to recycle it. Any other questions? Feel free to unmute. You know, I'm happy to chat with you guys. And thank you so much for dedicating your evening to hanging out with us.
I just want to say thank you for the presentation. It's very informative.
Absolutely, our pleasure.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys are the champions over here. I will put in a little bit of a plug. So we're working on some future programming for people who are really committed to recycling. And if they want, you know, a little bit beyond this sort of setting where we get the virtual tour, we're looking at doing kind of like a master's course in recycling, and we'll call them certified ecomaniacs. And there'll be some like certification involved in this process. Like we'll give people a certificate that says that they're certified ecomaniac and they're an expert recycler. So if that's something that any of you are interested in, please, you know, keep in touch and follow us on social media. We will be promoting the heck out of that event once that comes up. So we would love to keep you in the loop. You can also sign up for our newsletter. So maybe what we'll do after this is we'll put in a link to sign up for the newsletter in our follow-up email. So if you're interested in just getting like a monthly update from ecomaine about all the stuff that we're doing and events that we're going to be participating in, and you know, whether or not we're able to do school programming yet because of COVID, it's a good time to sign up for our newsletter and get that information on the spot. And straight from the source. So we can attach that maybe to our follow-up email with you guys. If there's anything else you would like to see, you know, we've got a lot of information on our website, but if there's a resource in particular you want, or if there's a program in the future that you want, please feel free to let us know, because we want to make content that's meaningful to you guys. And if we're making stuff that's super boring, then what's the point, right? Because nobody wants to watch that. So let us know, you know, if there's anything that you guys want to see, or, you know, I think at some point we might actually do a walkthrough of the plant with one of the educators. So we'll just like get mic'd up and we'll go into the plant while it's running and take some videos and show people what it looks like on a daily basis. So we might do some of that in the future, and we might be doing some other types of like kid-friendly programming coming up too. But if there's anything in particular that we haven't thought of, then we'd love to get your feedback.
The other thing too that I wanted to plug in there is that our the certified ecomaniac program that she mentioned is also really great for the teenagers in your life. So if you have any that are looking to get some resume boosters and are really into environmentalism and sustainability, that would be a really great option. It's a really great way to kind of get into the nitty-gritty of waste management, which happens to be one of the most accessible ways to reduce your impact and your carbon footprint. So if that's something of interest, definitely share that with them. We'd love to answer any questions that they have.
Yeah, plus it'd be good. Like, it's like, maybe we'll get you guys badges. So if you're in a dispute with somebody over whether or not something can be recycled, you can just flip open the badge and say, hey, I got my training from ecomaine. I know what I'm talking about. So it's like added credentials. You get street cred.
Definitely.
Any other questions?
I have one last question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Dodge. I live in South Portland in a condominium, and I religiously recycle my stuff at the transfer station in South Portland, but we have a Troiano dumpster in the back, and I think I'm the only one that recycles. Everyone else throws everything in there. And I'd love for you to tell me that maybe Troiano does some kind of sorting or recycling with those bins, but based on the look of your face, I'm guessing not.
I hear this a lot. So with condos, it's not always required that the condo association has to provide recycling services. I wish it was. I live in Old Orchard Beach in a condo, and they also don't provide recycling, so that's kind of a bummer. Do they have a recycling dumpster and a trash dumpster on site?
No, it's just one, unfortunately.
Okay. So it sounds like you're doing everything you can do, going to the transfer station to drop it off, which is great. You know, I don't believe in terms of like what's in the trash. I mean, people throw away, you know, hypodermic needles, you know, dirty diapers, cat waste, like,
Yeah.
you know, all of that really, really gross stuff. And there's no really safe way to process that and really rip open those bags and recover anything. You know, maybe if somebody's throwing away a piece of cardboard, they might be able to fish that out and put it in the recycling. But oftentimes when you put recycling in the trash, it's too contaminated with, you know, all of that gross stuff I already told you about.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So unfortunately, that it sounds like most of that stuff is heading into the trash. I will say that the owner communities in, you know, in Southern Maine, all of our 20 towns, they, there's a policy, and I'm skipping what it's called right now, but there's Maine law that basically says if you own a facility to process and handle recycling and waste, that tonnage is guaranteed to come to that facility. So even if you live in a condo in South Portland, because you're a South Portland resident and you pay taxes in South Portland, your waste is supposed to go to ecomaine. So rest assured knowing that it's going up that hierarchy and it's not going straight into a landfill as raw trash. It is getting combusted, turning into renewable energy, and it's being reduced by 90% in volume.
Oh, good.
So it is being put to a better and higher use. Now, of course, you know, maybe be nagging your neighbors, hey, like, wouldn't it be great if you could recycle? Or, you know, maybe talk to the condo association and see if they can provide maybe a cardboard dumpster to get you started. You know, we problem solve with folks. We've got a business development manager here at ecomaine, and we can troubleshoot and find recycling options for you guys, you know, if they're up for that. So there are plenty of vendors out there that can provide that service. And, you know, we can help work with them to make that happen for you if that's something that everyone is interested in.
Okay, so we could potentially get a recycling bin.
Yeah. Yeah.
And would someone come retrieve that, or is that something that we would have to make arrangements?
You could work with Troiano potentially, or maybe get another hauler. But yeah, there are lots of options. So feel free to, you know, shoot us an email.
Okay.
Yeah, info@ecomaine.org is perfect. It goes right to Lena and I. And we can take care of that for you. And we can, you know, at least give you some of the basic information to get you started.
Excellent. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions, guys? This is great. You guys have really good questions. All right, cool. If that's everything, then thank you guys so much. We'll let you out a little bit early so you can go have your dinner. But yeah, if you have any other questions after, you know, the session is done, if you've had some time to percolate on those questions overnight tonight and you really want to get in touch with us, just email info@ecomaine.org, shoot us a message on Facebook. All of that stuff comes to the two of us and our communications manager, Matt Grondin. So one of us will answer your question. We can help you out. So thank you guys so much. We really appreciate your time and your commitment to learning about recycling. And hopefully everybody's recycling right from here on out. So have a great night. Thank you again very much. And we'll see you soon.
Thanks, ladies.
Bye, guys.